compliant and what you would see yourself as an organisation in terms of delivering and achieving compliance. And again, that will be carry on. Thank you. So just some key dates. So the return board declaration form needs to be submitted to NHS resolution by noon on Thursday, the 17th of September. Please note that if we get any declaration forms after that timescale, sadly, you will be non-compliant. We're very rigid in terms of there's no flexibility or movement in that schedule. You will be notified within 48 hours, and we do have an appeals process that if you are in that position and you need to appeal, we need to know by Monday, 14th of October. And the aim is that you will all be notified of the outcome by the end of October 2020. Thank you.
Great, that's marvellous, Dee. Thank you very much for sharing your presentation. Moving swiftly on to Safety Action 7, we have Lisa Ramsey, who's our lead for all things maternity and service user MVPs at NHS England. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Jackie. So excuse me for coming to number 7 before number 1, but it's really helpful for people who are on the line who are involved with their maternity voice partnerships as service user representatives who might be whizzing off for school runs, so thank you. So Safety Action 7 has been updated this year. You can see it here. Can you demonstrate that you have a mechanism for gathering service user feedback and, importantly, that you work with your service users through your maternity voice partnership to co-produce local maternity services? So having a look at this one in a little bit more detail, as recently published, you have access to and use of the CQC Care Quality Commission National Maternity Survey results. Added to that, I'm sure you also have friends and family tests, but in terms of the evidence, CQC and use of that data is really important. For your provider level, ideally, as per guidance, maternity voice partnership, your evidence should include a terms of reference, minutes of regular maternity voice partnership meetings. So remembering that maternity voice partnerships are NHS working groups made up of at least a third service user voice representation, staff and commissioners working together to review and co-produce maternity services. So the minutes of regular meetings will demonstrate explicitly how feedback is obtained and consistent involvement of staff and service users in co-producing service developments based on the feedback. Additional evidence includes service developments that might have resulted from co-production activities that you've been doing. And finally, written confirmation from the chair that they're being remunerated for their work. And chairing a maternity voice partnership NHS multidisciplinary group is something that we must not be asking service users to do in a voluntary capacity. But there are members of MVPs, maternity voice partnerships, that are volunteers, and again, we should be making sure that they are able to claim out-of-pocket expenses. So making sure there's a budget and that MVP service user voice representatives are able to access that budget is really important. So some things that can help you. I'm sure lots of you already know about these, but I'll just whiz through them. Implementing First has a fantastic section on co-production with women and families and details exactly how to set up and function a maternity voice partnership. That's chapter 4 in that document. Chapter 5 in the Implementing the Maternity and Neonatal Commitments to Long-Term Plan is again a really useful resource for understanding how a maternity voice partnership functions well. Bottom left-hand corner, National Maternity Voices is our national organisation supporting and networking maternity voice partnerships, and there is a plethora of resource and information on that website to support you to make sure your maternity voice partnerships are functioning well. And finally, a number of resources on the Get Involved section of the NHS website. Thank you. The people to help you, obviously me, and my details are there. Hannah Lyons is also at National Maternity Voices, willing to offer support to help you achieve Safety Action 7. And finally, if you're interested, in a few weeks' time, we're doing a webinar on exploring the 2019 results from the CQC National Maternity Survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We're now going to bring Dee back, Dee Davis, Maternity Clinical Advisor, NHS Resolution, who we're going to now start the safety actions in order. So Safety Action 1, PMRT. Thank you, Dee.
Thank you, Jackie. And just to note, I'm here representing Embrace, who are actually, they own and support this safety action. And I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that in terms of changes for year 3, there have been any changes to the requirement for the safety action. There's still 4 parts to it, A, B, C and D standards. And we've increased, in terms of the technical guidance, it's much more detail and gives further clarity. We read a cohort of babies whereby you need to complete the tool, and we've got the inclusion of home birth. We also, I think this is quite important to note for you within the audience, that there is a requirement for a quarterly report to be discussed with your Trust Maternity Safety Champion. And I would really encourage you to use the PMRT tool to produce your reports. So the system will generate reports, and you will be able to download reports, particularly for the quarterly board reporting. That's a requirement. And also, from what I understand from Embrace, there's messages in terms of any changes will be shared through the PMRT tool, and they have a daily message. So I just keep saying, please sort of use that to support you in terms of demonstrating the evidence.
Thank you so much, Dee. Really helpful. Can I just remind everybody to mute where you're at, because it's a little bit disturbing for the speakers and for other listeners. Thank you very much for muting. Now we're going to thank you very much for muting. Now we're going to move swiftly on to Catherine Robbins. Catherine is our guru at NHS England Resolution for all things data. Over to you, Catherine, for Safety Action 2.
Okay, so I'm Catherine Robbins, and I'm the analytical lead for the maternity services data set at NHS Digital. So I'll just talk through some things we have been talking to trusts about on the action. We've held the 10th of 10 webinars today with data submitters and digital midwives to talk through the action, and it's been incredibly useful for us, and I hope for trusts as well. So very briefly, we've moved to a new version of the data set, that is MSDS version 2, and the first data for that related to April 19. And every trust, all 130 trusts, have made a submission every month since we moved to version 2, and we're really grateful for that. But the submissions are sometimes a little bit lacking in what they contain, and that leads us in the position of not really knowing as much about maternity services in England as we did before we moved to the new version of the data set. And the graph on the following slide gives a little illustration of that. So when we started in maternity services data set a few years ago, we had very little information on deliveries, very few trusts submitted the data, and we got into a really good position through the CNST scheme over the last 2 years with the data. But that's now fallen off for version 2, so you can see that we haven't got as many deliveries there, and we haven't really got that national picture now. And that's the sort of reason why we've looked at the elements for this year, which are different from before, for Action 2 for this year. And the next slide lists some of the challenges, so I won't go through them all, but we want to have a really good level of births and bookings in the data, and we want some of the key building blocks of the data, such as estimated date of delivery, postcode and ethnic category, to be completed. We're also looking through Action 2 at some key policy areas such as continuity of care and personalised care. But we're also working closely with the Action 6 on the Saving Babies' Lives Care Bundle, and that's another important area for the MSDS this year. So, as I said, there are two actions really about MSDS. So the main one is what Safety Action 2 we're talking about now, and all the criteria within that are mandatory this time. The first 13 are in the scorecard we'll issue, and we'll be assessing those at NHS Digital, and the 14th around the maternity record standard is assessed through a declaration to NHS resolution. And then the option is there to demonstrate your compliance with Safety Action 6 through April data from MSDS, but there are other options if you're not ready to do that in time. So we've split the actions into various sections. So some of it is really about keeping in touch. We have a mailbox, maternity.dq@nhs.net, which is there to answer any queries on Action 2. We've been looking for trusts to register at least 2 people to submit the data, because we had over 40 trusts who only had 1 person registered, and that was a challenge for our communications with the trusts, but also putting the submission at risk should anyone be away. And we're almost there now. I think as of today, we've just got 5 trusts still to register a second person. We also have been running the webinars to raise awareness, and as of this morning, with webinar number 10, all trusts in scope of the CNST scheme had attended the webinars, so we're really pleased with how that's gone. We are about to issue a post-implementation review questionnaire so we can understand where each of the trusts are in relation to improving their data for MSDS version 2, and that is one of the other criteria. And then 14, as I mentioned before, is about the maternity record standard, and that will be a declaration straight back to NHS resolution rather than to my team. And then we have been listening a lot to what trusts and system suppliers have had to say on the webinars over January, and we could see that what we had set was perhaps just that little bit too challenging in terms of giving trusts a good chance to send us all the data we're looking for through the scheme. And so what we've done now is we're actually focusing on the data for the assessment for April and May 2020. It was going to be March and April, so that is an update from the materials that were issued just before Christmas. And we're looking at having key tables from each of the trusts on the things that are most important to us and NHS England to look at on the data. And we're also looking over this time period to ensure that every trust makes a submission every month. Obviously that has been happening anyway, but we're keen to see that sustained, and indeed for January every trust has made a submission for the end of January. And on the following slide, not to go through all of these in detail, but I've mentioned a number of areas that are really important to us to improve the data on. And so those have been brought together to look at the various criteria we're going to assess for trusts against the April and May data. So we have issued a draft scorecard to data submitters for comment. A few things came up, and we know that we need to make a few minor revisions to it, but we're hoping by the end of this week to issue a further version of the scorecard to show for data relating up to November 2019 how trusts are doing so far and the areas that they need to improve on by the assessment month. And just, I think, one final slide on the progress. So in terms of those 10 webinars, we have worked with 8 system suppliers on having webinars that are for their trusts and themselves. So we've been able to have a good discussion about specific systems and their readiness to meet the actions. This slide was written a little while before, so now we've had everyone at the webinars, every trust has been represented. Every trust has submitted the data they needed to by the 31st of January. Almost every trust has more than one data submitter now. And as I said, the draft scorecard is out with another more improved draft coming very soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Catherine, for that comprehensive presentation. Just another reminder, keep on mute, please, if you can. And I'm now going to introduce you to Michelle Upton, who's going to talk to us about Safety Action 3 and Attain. Michelle Upton is the program lead for Workstream 2, which is the safety workstream of the Maternity Transformation Program. Thank you, Michelle.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jackie. And I'm just so delighted that the scheme has been such a driver for implementation of transitional care in the last 3 years. So in year 3, what we wanted to do was really embed and build on the year 2 scheme, absolutely conscious that so many services already have transitional care in place, but we know that there were challenges for some in terms of having developed a pathway for transitional care. Actually implementing that pathway was quite a challenge in terms of staffing and resource, and for some trusts, considering that had to be a separate place to a postnatal ward or a mother and baby type facility. So what I've done in the slide, as you'll see, is I've stripped out what's no longer in the year 2 action and highlighted in red and in italics what the changes are. So we're building on the fact that we still want a pathway of care, which has been jointly approved by both maternity and neonatal teams. The intention behind that is really working as a perinatal seamless service, and that the pathway of care has been fully implemented and is being audited, so that we know it's not implemented for a month and then perhaps there aren't staff available, and the transitional care can't operate as intended. We have neonatal safety champions who have newly been appointed, and we really wanted to involve them in all neonatal safety activity, and so we're asking that audit finding is shared with neonatal safety champions. In terms of data recording processes, that remains unchanged from last year, as is the ask for commissioner returns to have been shared. We're not mandating that those commissioner returns from activity are routinely shared, but more on request by the ODN leads and the commissioner. And that was in response to ODNs who feel that they have a relatively good understanding of activity, but we want to continue collecting activity to inform future commissioning. I think I've probably covered adequately around the neonatal safety champions involvement, but again, an intention, and I'll come to this in Action 9, about profiling the role of safety champions, and particularly the board level safety champion having really good sight of the CNST scheme, but also the requirements of the wider safety agenda. And so making that easy by sharing the action plans with both the neonatal safety champion and the board level safety champion. And that is changed from sharing action plans, which were previously done with the local maternity system and the ODN from last year, where the feedback was they have a good understanding of Safety Action 3 at the provider level.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Really helpful. We're moving swiftly on to Safety Action 4. And Dee Davis, again, is going to start us off with that safety action. We're going to be joined by Joe Mountfield from the RCOG for the Q&A. So any questions related to the medical workforce, Joe will be able to answer those questions when we get to Q&A. So over to Dee for Safety Action 4.
Thank you, Jackie. And just for the audience, Tim Draycott, who's an obstetrician, but he's also a senior maternity clinical advisor for NHS Resolution, and also has works for RCOG, is available also for the Q&A question. So in terms of this safety action,
Joe Mountfield from the RCOG is around too.
Thank you, Tim. So in terms of a significant change from last year the Safety Action 4 was titled as the Medical Workforce Planning Standard, and we've moved away from the Medical Workforce title. It's now referenced to Clinical Workforce Planning. And if we go on to our next slide, you'll see the reference point. Oh, sorry. So in terms of the changes to the Clinical Workforce Planning, there's now the inclusion of not only our obstetric workforce and our anaesthetic workforce, but also the inclusion of our neonatal medical workforce and our neonatal nursing workforce. And that is predominantly because in maternity service, all professional groups, we are in essence one team. And I know, thank you, Jo. Jo has very kindly, which you'll be able to see at the end of this presentation, she has absolutely got the detail from the last year 3 safety action standards in terms of the GMC survey, and it makes for very interesting reading. So I won't sort of go into depth only because I'm mindful of time. And just to note, in terms of the ask for the obstetric workforce, we require 2019 GMC National Training Survey that should have taken place from the 9th of March 2019 to the 1st of May 2019. That will be the survey that you will be audited against. So changes. So we now have the inclusion of the anaesthetic medical workforce. And we made some guidance in our technical guidance around the standards that you need to audit yourself to. And I just really want to reference that the narrative that you've probably already cited is absolutely the standard that you need to audit. All that is different is the numbers that have been used to reference the standards. And I would urge you just to look at the technical guidance for the standards. However, some of you, from what I understand, have already accessed the ACSA website to download the Excel version of the standards, and the numbers are slightly different, but just focus on the narrative. And the 6-month period, which has already commenced, is from Wednesday the 1st of January 2020 to Tuesday the 30th of June 2020. So again, a 6-month period. And you would need to demonstrate, if you are unable to say you're compliant, that an action plan has been presented and agreed at your board level. Thank you. Next slide. And then it's again the same concept is around the neonatal medical workforce. You need to again undertake an audit whereby you can audit against the British Association of Perinatal Medicine national standards for the junior medical staffing. Again, it's the same timescale as the previous slide, and in terms of who you share that information with, you will need to share that not only at your board level but also with the neonatal operating delivery network. And then the next slide is the final element to Safety Action 4, which is the clinical workforce for the neonatal nursing team. And again, same principles, you will need to audit against a 6-month period. And if your findings from your action plan, if you're unable to demonstrate compliance, will need to be agreed at your board level and again shared. And the point of contact is Fiona Smith, who's at the Royal College of Nursing, and included in the seminar is her contact details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dee. Very helpful. Moving on to Safety Action 5, midwifery workforce, and we've got Zenas Udin, who's the Head of Quality and Safety at the Royal College of Midwives. Thank you, Zenas.
Thank you, Jackie. So at Safety Action 5 is, can you demonstrate an effective system of midwifery workforce planning to the required standard? So related to the action, the key points to raise are there's no major change in Safety Action 5. It is, however, more refined, as Year 2 actions were reported as slightly vague, needing more clarity. Most of the changes in Safety Action 5, Year 3, has predominantly been around wording. So the teams jiggle some of the syntax and semantics, so you may find it easy to follow. The yellow in the document relates to changes in the wording only. The green refers to minor tweaks and changes to ensure more clarity. So if you decide to, you can pull up the Year 2's actions and compare to Year 3 so you can clearly see the differences. In view of time constraints, I'll just make reference to the parts that are highlighted green. So in the required standard part, Part C, we have changed it from women receive one-to-one care in labour to all women in active labour receive one-to-one midwifery care. Now, in the minimum evidential requirement for the trust board section, bullet point 2, it's another sentence that has been added, and that's to include evidence of mitigation, escalation for managing a shortfall in staffing. Again, that's self-explanatory. Bullet point 3 and 4 was once just bullet point 3 in year 2, again bringing more clarity to the document. Bullet point 6 has been changed from 9% to 8 to 10% in line with the birth rate plus. In bullet point 7, the word local audit has been included into the sentence. Previously in year 2, we had a lengthy sentence on red flags. That was removed as it was already explained in the NICE guidelines. As we move further down, the relevant time period is 6 months. So this is in line with the NICE guidance that 6 months of data is required. So you've been advised to choose data from a successive 6-month period, and that is over a 9-month time frame, which is December 20th till Thursday 17th of September 2020. Submission is tight. So moving to the technical guidance section, there's no changes to this part other than adding another section about what to do if 100% supernumerary status hasn't been achieved with a labour ward coordinator. So in which the action plan is to ensure the director or head of midwifery must work in partnership with the trust board to achieve this, including a timeline frame, which is really, really important. And finally, just some thoughts about compliance for Safety Action 5. In year 1, it was 95%. Year 2 was 97%. So excellent work to everyone on behalf of the RCM, NHSI, NHSE, and the Department of Health. So let's make year 3 100%.
Thank you very much, Tina. There's the challenge that we've been set. We're moving swiftly on to Safety Action 6, Saving Lives Care Bundle version 2, and we have National Clinical Director and Consultant Obstetrician and Maternity Safety Champion National, Matthew Jolly. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Jackie. So the Care Bundle has changed quite a lot. The new version of the Care Bundle was launched in April 2019, and we've tried to reduce the reporting burden by allowing people to submit data through MSDS. But of course, we've got a bit of a delay in people reaching the real digital maturity to do that. So for this year, we put in some small audits to check compliance. So it is a different from year 1, where people would just say they were compliant. Now we're actually collecting some data. I think one of the key things about the Care Bundle is that if you want to do something different, you can, but you have to get it cleared with your clinical network. So it's not for NHS resolution to say whether what you're doing is okay or not. It's for your clinical network to decide whether what you propose doing as an alternative to the Care Bundle will actually still deliver fewer stillbirths. In the meantime, until you've actually fully complied with the Care Bundle, can you carry on doing the survey? So I'm going to whiz through the elements. Obviously, there's an awful lot on the slides. I'm not going to go through everything on the slides, but you have got access to these for reference later on if you want. So element 1, we've got 2 indicators or metrics to do on carbon monoxide measurement. And again, we'd like an audit for those this year of 40 consecutive cases using locally available data to show how well you're complying. And we'd want to see people reaching 80% compliance to pass. If you haven't reached 95%, have a plan in place about how you're going to get to a really high level of compliance. But if you've got more than 1 in 5 women who aren't having carbon monoxide testing, then you have not passed. Moving on to element 2. Element 2 has only got the 1 metric now, which is about doing the risk assessment. And again, that's an audit of 40 consecutive cases. But we've also asked to make sure you're complying with some 3 specific features of the Care Bundle, which is scans for women with a high BMI, the uterine artery Dopplers, and doing an audit of those babies born less than the third centile after 37 weeks and 6 days gestation. Again, I know there's some trusts who are going to struggle to do the uterine artery Doppler or who've decided not to use the uterine artery Doppler. That's fine, but agree the outcome, how you're going to do things with your clinical network, and do bear in mind we do want to see about how you pick up early onset growth restriction. We've done brilliantly reducing stillbirths after 37 weeks, but we are struggling to reduce stillbirths at earlier gestations. So the uterine artery Dopplers serve two functions. One, it helps triage people to either more intensive or less intensive scan surveillance, but it also helps detect early onset growth restriction. Next slide, please. One of the challenges with the care bundle is having enough scan capacity. I know lots of trusts are working on this. Certainly looking at my own organisation, when we looked at the number of scans we are doing, we're doing a huge number of growth scans, and one of the things we're looking at is a demand management tool to try and weed out some of the unnecessary growth scans so that we have capacity to do the necessary growth scans. You're under no obligation to use this ultrasound request form at all, but it's what I'm using in my own trust, and anyone who wants to use it or adapt it or do whatever they want with it, you're very welcome. The other question I often get asked is about compliance with the Perinatal Institute's growth assessment protocol. People are absolutely at liberty to use that process if they want to, but again, just go through with your clinical network about how you're going to comply with the challenges of the care bundle. I think in terms of GAP, they do some additional scans at earlier gestations to pick up and circumvent not doing the uterine artery Doppler. And I suppose the other thing to bear in mind is that you don't have to use GAP or the customized growth charts for your symphysis fundal height measurements, but you do need to train people to do symphysis fundal height measurements properly. So GAP offers a great program for doing that, but we have other ways of doing that, and it is included in our Health Education England training package as well. So trusts are at liberty to decide what they want to do in terms of that. Next slide. Element 3 is about reduced fetal movements, and again, you can see the indicators we've got here. The area of controversy with element 3 has been in relation to people using computerized CTG, and there's quite a lot in the care bundle about why we reached that decision about using computerized CTG. Not all trusts will be able to procure those machines in time, and not all trusts will choose to use computerized CTG. In which case, again, talk to your clinical network about what you're putting in place instead to help support that. That might be getting a more senior review of the CTG. It might be about putting an additional scan in place to pick up problems that way. One of the reasons we put the computerized CTG in was to reduce the scan burden, but you have choices. And then moving on to element 4. Element 4 is about achieving competency in electronic fetal monitoring, and there's some really exciting work going on that Tim Draycott is leading with the RCOG and the RCM about where we're moving to with joining up risk assessment with CTG interpretation, with escalation, and possibly even with consent as well. That work is underway, and what will be combined with that is a one-day training package. Now, that may be too late for some trusts to adopt that particular process. So we have produced some flexibility about training packages. If you can put together a whole day's training for training, great. 2 half days would be acceptable. And for some trusts, they will still want to carry on with their CTG training packages. If you complete a CTG training package, that will count as 1 half day of training. But we still want that multidisciplinary training, people training together, and understanding about human factors, escalation, and all those other side of things, which reflects what NHS resolution tell us about why we get claims in relation to electronic fetal monitoring. And we've put some links in for some of the training packages that people might choose. Again, if you agree a training package with your clinical network, we don't want to be over-prescriptive. If people have clever ideas or got new research projects, as long as your clinical network says that it's okay, we will accept that. So the additional elements for the care bundle is element 5, which relates to reducing preterm birth. And again, you'll see the indicators we've used for that, and they really relate to steroid usage and making sure women receive their magnesium sulfate, and that we incentivize babies being born in the appropriate units with the right neonatal care. There are also some additional factors that we asked trusts to confirm, particularly in relation to having the right capacity in place for cervical link scanning, etc., and also have a look, do an audit about how many people are receiving steroids and then not delivering within the next 7 days. What we don't want is that every woman below a certain gestation be given steroids just to meet the target. The aim is that for people to appropriately receive steroids. So that's what we've got that additional audit in place. So you understand that you're not getting too heavy-handed with the steroids as well. Yeah, I've mentioned that one already, so we can move on. So I appreciate the implementation of the care bundle, a big challenge. It's been very exciting to see the reductions in stillbirth that have been achieved so far, and I'm not claiming all those for the care bundle. There's lots of other work going on that contributes to those falls in stillbirth. The key, to my mind, is about delegating this work out to a team within your hospital and getting people to lead on the elements separately, rather than one person trying to lead this all by themselves. It's the whole department working together, and that burden shared should make it much easier to actually deliver all the components. I know that people like the Preterm Birth Network have been sharing some great guidelines on preterm birth clinics. They're very happy to share. There's fantastic training packages developed by Ed Johnson on the uterine artery Dopplers, Nigel Simpson on the preterm birth side of things. There are training packages, some are already available in the Health Education England electronic learning for health site, and there are new training packages which will be published in the very near future about the screening for small for gestational age babies, reduced fetal movements, etc. That covers everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Very helpful as always. We're moving swiftly on to Safety Action 8, and we're inviting back Dee Davis and Tim Draycott, and hopefully Elizabeth is joining us as well to talk about workforce training.
Thank you, Jackie. So in terms of a change from last year, we've now got the inclusion in our in-house training of our neonatologist team, and that's partly because in the clinical area we work as one team, so we should train as one team. And I know already in terms of questions and answers that we're receiving, this is a safety action standard that trusts are feeling has stretched them. There is also now the addition of twice yearly in situ training and the addition of the neonatal resuscitation training. And part of the key driver for this change is that we at NHS England have just populated our first year's findings from the early notification scheme in relation to babies that are born with brain injuries. And the findings have highlighted concerns of the neonatal management, in particular airway management skills, escalation and newborn life support that takes place in the clinical area. And just really for you to note, in terms of delivering the neonatal resuscitation training, we do have a gold standard, but I'm not saying that this is a must-do. So our gold standard should be that the training should be delivered by a newborn life support instructor instructor, sorry. But we recognise it's the first year of this change. And so we've said that actually if your trainer holds a newborn life support certificate which is in date and they are skilled in training in our clinical environments, then that would be appropriate. I would urge you to look at the technical guidance and the resource links to inform you in terms of some of your designing around your in-house training, and as Matthew's already touched on, the addition of a separate local fetal monitoring training day. Tim, is there anything else you want to add? No.
No, I'm happy to answer questions though. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dee, and also in advance to Tim for the questions. We're moving swiftly on now to Safety Action 9, and I'm now inviting Michelle Upton back to speak about safety champions.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. So with the inclusion of neonatal safety champions having been appointed in the last few months, what we wanted as part of the intention for Safety Action 9 was to really drive the relational aspects between safety champions to make sure that safety intelligence is really fully understood and is shared right from the front line up to the board, to enable the board safety champion to really represent the safety challenges for the service at board level. And to do so, we wanted there to be a really well understood pathway or a mechanism for the whole team understanding how that safety intelligence will be shared. So we know from invited reviews, CQC inspections and others that it's not always known to frontline staff who their board safety champions are, and indeed who their midwifery, obstetric or neonatal safety champions are. So we're hoping that that pathway, which is really going to drive that mechanism, ensuring that that's shared with everybody, will really increase the visibility and the profile of safety champions, particularly for frontline staff. You'll see a new component to Safety Action 9 in terms of continuity of carer. Now, ideally, we'd have liked Safety Action focusing just on continuity for this year, but continuity is such a critical priority in terms of meeting the national ambition, but also meeting the vision for better births and for safety. So we felt that having board level oversight and safety champion oversight for progress being made with implementing continuity of carer was probably the best way to go about it for this year. So it's a slightly different theme tucked in under Safety Action 9, but hopefully explains why it's been tucked in under Safety Action 9. And so we're asking board safety champions to maintain oversight of an action plan that describes how the service is working towards a minimum of 51% women receiving continuity of care pathway by March of next year. We also wanted to build on the component of Safety Action 9 that has been there for the previous 2 years in terms of executive sponsor involvement in the quality improvement work being led through the Maternal Neonatal Safety Improvement Programme, which is the new name for the Mat-Neo Collaborative. So some of those criteria just reinforced this year that there's involvement in maternity and neonatal safety improvement activity within the trust, but also the local learning system that's building on this last year, but also national improvement work led by the Mat-Neo SIP that the trust is directly involved with. So we know that some local maternity systems are working with local learning systems to implement, for example, Precept as a regional initiative or as a local maternity system initiative, and that may be in addition to some local work trusts might be doing, for example, on Attain. So it's making sure that the executive sponsor has oversight for all quality improvement activity involving the trust. And the National Clinical Improvement Leaders Group, the KILG, is a new group being set up as part of taking forward the Mat-Neo SIP, and so some trust staff are members of the KILG, not all are. So included that where trusts are involved, that again we integrate that activity with the other QI activity, but just to be aware that if you haven't heard of KILG because your trust isn't part of the membership, that criteria will not necessarily relate to you at the moment. We've got Katie De Freitas on the line who'll be part of answering any queries in relation to the KILG or any other aspects in the Q&A session. That's all from me. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Helpful as always. We're moving swiftly on to Safety Action 10, Early Notification Scheme, and back to Dee.
Thank you, Jackie. So you'll be pleased to know this is our final Safety Action 10, and this actually sits within NHS resolution, and we tend to lead on this Safety Action standard. And you'll be pleased, really of importance, that actually there's been no changes have been made to this standard, so you should be very confident in terms of what the ask is. I've included within my presentation the criteria of babies that need to be reported to NHS resolution, and this aligns to each baby counts. And the final slide of my presentation, just to confirm the reporting dates. So it's a financial year that you have to report in terms of the ENS criteria, and that's from Monday, the 1st of April 2019 to Tuesday, the 31st of March 2020. And we do cross-reference against the NNRD Badgernet data in terms of assurance that the right number of babies have been reported in accordance to the Safety Action Standard 10. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dee. So we cantered through 10 safety actions from our leads who have contributed towards developing the safety actions, and now we go into our Q&A. So you may see the chat icon on your screen, and I hope you've been posting questions as we've gone along. If not, then there's an opportunity to do that now. So we're now going to read out some of the questions, and we'll ask the panel to choose which question they're best placed to answer.
Okay. Well, this question I can't answer because I wasn't in Leeds, but Julia Harrison-Merton, has the revised guidance mentioned at the meeting on Friday in Leeds been issued yet, please? That would have been revised. The CNST standard, won't it?
Yes. So NHS resolution has had to make some minor amendments to the original Safety Action Standards guidance that was circulated, and we're pretty confident that that task should be completed fairly soon and will be distributed to everyone who was on our mailing list.
Great, thank you very much. So the next question we have is about attain reviews from Annie Williams. Our trust has been discussing stopping attain reviews because we don't have more than 5% of term babies being admitted to the neonatal unit. Will this mean we're not compliant with Safety Action 3E? That question to Michelle.
Yes, so we'd have to break down the action. Essentially, we want you to maintain oversight of term admissions because if we don't maintain oversight, that number may increase again, and in a year's time, you may no longer be sitting at 5%. So we do want to maintain ongoing oversight for attain reviews. If your action plan should really be revised on an ongoing basis to reflect modifiable factors for reducing avoidable term admissions, because even though 5% is the percentage that we ask you to work towards, that doesn't mean that there aren't other babies whose admissions couldn't have been avoided. So we ask you to maintain oversight for that.
Thank you, Michelle. Another question from Fiona Galassian. Sorry for that pronunciation if it's not quite right. As an LMS project manager, I am not Trust Board and I've not seen the template that will be completed by Trust to show compliance with all the standards. Can this be sent to everyone? And I think unanimously the answer is...
So thank you for the question. We keep the Excel spread self-declaration form on our website, and at the moment it hasn't been uploaded, but as soon as it's been uploaded, it will also be circulated into terms for the trust to complete. Thank you.
So I've got another question for Michelle. I'm going to test her memory because she might not be able to remember every bit of the action without it being of her. But in relation to Safety Action 3B, what can we expect to audit? Can this be expanded, please?
There's two components to the audit. Just from memory, I think there's that you're auditing implementation of transitional care, the number of babies who are being admitted to transitional care, how long they stayed, that the policy that you have agreed across your perinatal service will have included standards that you are auditing against those standards. The other component to the audit would be that ongoing review of term admissions and identifying those of which are avoidable, and then your action plan that has been devised as a result, and auditing against progress of that action plan.
Okay, we've got another question from Manny Williams. Who has access to the drill down results for the GMC survey? Our obstetricians this year only seem to have access to the overall results, which doesn't give them the required level of detail to get this information. Now, which...
Joe or Tim?
There's Joe or Tim on the line who can help with that.
If Joe's on the line, she's eminently more qualified than me. My understanding is that you should be able to get the detail for your trust, for your satisfaction. You can't get everyone else's details, but if there are any problems with that, if you email Joe Mountfield at the RCOG, definitely be able to help you with you.
Great, thank you very much for that, Tim. I'm going to, in the interest of fairness, I'm going to try and ask some questions to somebody else, because Annie Williams has asked lots of questions, so I will try and come back to them. Annie, I'm just trying to not show favouritism here. So Joanne Blackler, is there an expectation that all elements of the Saving Babies' Lives Care Bundle version 2 have to be completed by 31st of March, or that is the plan in place to achieve all the CNST submissions? My understanding is that your actions have to be in place by the time you do your submission to NHS resolution. Now, some of the items, like the data item, you have to comply with, I think, April and May's data. Some of the other ones are auditing April, May, June, where some of them will be, your trust has to say they're compliant by the time of the submission. So I think you have to look at the detail for each of the safety actions to know precisely where you need to do what you need to do. I think as a guiding principle, if there aren't specific dates about when the compliance should be achieved by, then the compliance is by the time you submit, your trust submits to NHS resolution. And that makes sense because some of them are impossible to have done by the beginning of the financial year.
So a question that I think Michelle might be able to answer. Where can links to all these resources mentioned be found in one place?
The local maternity system hub will contain many of the links. I'm conscious that not everybody on the line may have access to the LMS hub. NHS resolution will hold links to many of them, and they will be embedded in the guidance anyway. In terms of many of the safety actions and resources to support the safety work, do get in touch with us through the Maternity Safety Champion inbox, and we will send them to you directly. However, to say that we are in the throes of building on the Maternity Safety Champion website, and all of the resources will be on there, but they won't be there imminently. So do contact us through the Safety Champion inbox if there is something that the NHS resolution guidance doesn't hold.
Another question for a member of the team, possibly Michelle. Can you confirm if the exec sponsor has to attend a local learning system event?
Yes, they do. So there are 4 events that we need engagement with by the exec sponsor between now and September, and that can be local learning system events, attendance at a KILG if your trust is a member of a KILG, the national learning event on the 9th of March, or webinars that will be hosted as part of phase 2 of the programme.
Next question from Julia Harrison-Mizon. Can you ensure that there is version control on the maternity and centre guidance updates so we know we're accessing the latest version? I assume we can do that.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Thank you for raising that, actually.
Question from Josette Jones, and I think this may well be a question for Dee, hopefully. Does the 80% compliance mean for each individual element or overall?
In terms of which standard? Because
I suspect that saving babies' lives.
Yeah.
It's not the training standard.
There's no details, so we haven't got enough information, Josette, to answer that question.
Sorry.
We haven't got enough information, Josette, to answer that question. If you'd like to
I can answer that question. Sorry, just. All right. So it's about 80. Sorry, we've lost the question on the screen. So just bear with us for a second. Does the 80% mean for each individual element or overall? So it is it is clearly specified in the next version that will come out which elements you need to achieve 80% on. It's not 80% for the whole of the care bundle. It's been broken down to individual elements, and that should be clear in the next version that you see.
So a question from Annie Williams. Element 1 in your slide is different from the NHS resolution document online. Is this document online out of date? So this is referring to element 1 in our slide. Is that safety action 1, I assume?
Yes, so in terms we've had to make some changes. I've listed some of those current changes into my presentation. So all of you should receive the updated version as soon as we've uploaded it onto our NHS website page.
A couple of more questions about the care bundle. The ultrasound request form we are going to try and make available. We'll send a link out to it, or we'll make it available on the hub, and it has been shared in various other forums as well. So, and we'll try and make sure the clinical networks got hold of it as well. There was another question which I think we've answered already about do all the elements of the care bundle have to be implemented by the 31st of March? I think there are some things like you won't have done all the training by the 31st of March. I think you have to have a plan in place by then. Some of the items audits will have to be starting then, but some elements you only have to complete by the time you're making the submission. And again, that becomes more obvious when you go through the new form.
So there's a question. There's a question from Alison Talbot, and this relates to Safety Action 8. Tim Draycott may be able to help us with this one. Are GP, VTS and FY2s that only come to neonates for 4 months required to have NLS training?
I think yes, because they are part of the neonatal department, so they are going to be involved in neonatal life support on a daily basis. So it makes sense to me that even though they're just there for 4 months, they're part of the team in neonates. So I think yes.
Thank you, Tim.
So we've got a request here for whether we could set up an online forum or group email for all the local maternity information system or maternity leads to sort of share ideas. I don't know whether perhaps that's one for us to take away and see what we could do about that. It may be something you might have to try and set up locally in your local learning systems, your clinical networks, but we will see what's possible. We have the most enormous WhatsApp group, couldn't we?
Yeah. We could also talk to our Neo SIP colleagues just to try and understand what forums they have, because they will be probably the recipients of and have the insights into all the good practices. So, right, we'll take that as an action.
So, a question from Annie Williams. Is there any guidance for how trusts should direct funds if we get the 10% refund? It would be useful to be able to suggest to the trust that maternity neonates get at least some of the funds reinvested in these areas to continue improvement safety work.
Okay, that's a common theme. So the way the incentive scheme works is that there is in effect a surcharge on people's CNST payments. So if you're successful in meeting the standard, that money really should go back to your finance officer to decide how he wants to use it in the trust. That's one of the rewards of funding your service properly to meet all the standards. Clearly, as you've probably noticed by now, that we're moving the goalposts because we're determined to improve outcomes and reduce litigation and claims, and particularly meet the ambition to reduce morbidity and mortality. So we're not going to change that. That is for your trust leadership to decide how that 10% refund is paid because it's their money. Obviously, if you fail to meet the standard, then any money that comes back to you should be linked to a project to help you meet the standard the next year, and that money comes with very tight strings on it about how it's used. So I think it's about you managing upwards and working with your trust leadership, how you might want to access some of that 10% to drive improvement and make sure you're ahead of the game to meet next year's standards. But we can't tell trusts what they should use that money for.
And just to follow on from that, we have got some very good examples and case histories from trusts in England who have maternity services who have managed to pull back a portion of their premium to support their improvement journey. So this can be done, and as Matthew's mentioned, this is about having the appropriate conversations and managing upwards. So, is there another question?
Probably lots, but
please do continue to type your questions.
It's Catherine here. I can see a couple of questions for me.
Oh, please do, Catherine. Thank you.
Okay, so someone has asked about Safety Action 2 number 5, which is that long list of tables which need to be submitted to the Maternity Services data set. And whether we're needing a certain percentage for each of those. The context behind this is that some system suppliers have yet to enable those really important tables, and so we're not assessing necessarily the content of the tables themselves, more that the trust is now in a position that they can send something in that table to us, because at the moment some won't be able to do that. Then of course we are looking at some key data items actually in other parts of the action, but we're simply looking for that table to land with some data in it and not assessing it at this stage in any more detail unless it comes up under one of the other points. And there was also a question further down about the antenatal continuity of care plans and how we are assessing that. So that's from Katie Philpott. And the important thing to bear in mind here is we are assessing whether trusts are able to report to NHS Digital through the MSDS about whether a plan is in place. We're not actually counting the number of plans. So there are options to say yes or no for a plan being in place. And we're looking for 90% of the bookings in that month to have a yes or no for the antenatal continuity plan marked alongside them.
Any more for you, Catherine, that you can see?
I haven't spotted any others, but I will scroll down to the bottom in case some more have arrived.
So we've got a question here I don't think we've answered yet, probably for Michelle. Question from Carol Carlisle. Can KILG members represent the LMS?
Katie de Freitas, can I refer that question to you? Can
KILG
members represent the LMS?
LMS.
Yeah, absolutely. So the KILG members are essentially local leaders that work within organisations to support some of the coordination of that local learning system. That local learning system already engages with the LMS through its key stakeholders. So generally that won't be the same person. We bring the KILG members together 4 times a year to really support how we progress those local learning systems. So there'll be key connections and coordination with the LMS, but it's anticipated that they may be slightly different people because their role is to provide leadership and support the moving of that local improvement plan within trusts and within that local learning system.
Thank you, Katie. There's a question here from Julia Harrison-Pizon. Can you ensure that there is one version control on the maternity incentive guidance update so that we know we are accessing the latest version? I think we've answered that question already. It's come up again. The answer is yes. And the NHS resolution website is the one version of the truth, I think. Yes.
Thank you, Jackie.
There's another question about where can links to all these resources mentioned be found? Can they be all found in one place? I think we've mentioned a lot of links today. Some are embedded within the safety action document. Some of the training links I've mentioned are available on the Health Education England e-learning for health website. Michelle, is there anything else you can say about availability of links elsewhere? Is that
we said the LMS hub, soon to be on the Safety Champion hub, links to the MatNeo sub-programme are on the MatNeo sub-website itself. Safety Champions, there are links on the Safety Champion website, and many of them are embedded in the resource pack that accompanies these.
So there is a challenge there, isn't there? Because we've mentioned several different websites in several different places. So I think that's something for us to go away and think if there is a one-stop way we can do that. Or
the intention is for the Safety Champions hub to be the one-stop place.
Okay.
We just have struggled with resource to upload everything onto there. So, but we're surmounting that at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, so the Safety Champion website will be the one-stop place to go in the future. Great, thank you for that.
Danielle is asking about slides from today being shared, and of course they will be shared in due course shortly after this WebEx.
Great.
As will the recording.
As will the recording, so you can share the recording with your board if that's something that you choose to do. Okay, so I think we're coming to a close now. So the questions are repeat questions. There is something from Linda Magiker, and that is, as a trust, we are struggling a lot with fresh ears and have always provided feedback, in brackets, clinical network, regarding the fresh ears. And so the question is, we go on, the recently launched FM toolkit referring to second person counting, FH for a minute, etc., if followed literally, will not help improve outcomes, but be a source of stress on how to. Sorry, Indra, I've missed the end of your question that hasn't shown up on the screen. So I'm not quite sure whether we're going to be able to answer that. I'll try and find it again and expand, but I don't know whether there's another question that we can ask in the meantime.
I think we're coming to the end of the questions. I'm desperately scrolling through to see if there's anything else. So thank you all for your patience. This is our new NHS England WebEx software that we use for the first time. We've already found one challenge, and that apparently there were unlimited numbers, but we've managed to oversubscribe this call. I think we got up to over 250 at one stage on the call.
So Linda Machikari, I've now found your question. Apologies. So what you're asking is the fresh eyes. We got to the second person counting the SH for a minute, etc. If followed literally, will not help improve outcomes, but be a source of stress on how to achieve, etc. Can this be looked into, please? So I think you're asking if NHS resolution or the incentive scheme can look into this. I think the scheme is, well, I'll ask one of the panel members to respond to this, and I think it might be best if Dee responds to this.
Thank you, Jackie. So I've noted your question. I mean, so in terms of clinical assessment of fetal well-being, there is a combination in terms of assessing, if a baby's stressed or not. I note that you want it to be looked into, and it might be a conversation separate to today's web seminar only because I'm mindful of time. And you can contact me directly, Linda, through the Maternity Incentive Scheme email account, which is mis@resolution.nhs.uk, and I can take the question away and discuss it as a team at NHS Resolution and come back to you. Thank you, Linda.
It's Tim. Just Dee and Linda. Linda, just as Matthew said before, this definitely currently being investigated at a national level. What's the best way we can kind of look after and implement intermittent auscultation, so we can get back to you offline about that.
Tim, there's another question which you may be best placed to answer.
Yeah.
In Safety Action 8, all obstetric staff, do all obstetric staff need to hold the NLS Resuscitation Council qualification, or does this just relate to neonatal medical staff? So
everyone needs to do some neonatal training, and just as Dee said, that neonatal training needs to be undertaken by someone who currently holds an NLS attendance certificate, but they don't have to be an NLS instructor because there are very few of them. But we would like some basic care of a baby born in an unexpectedly poor condition, which is essentially care before the neonatologist arrives. But obstetricians, midwives, and anaesthetists do not need to hold an NLS certificate, no.
As part of this requirement, yeah.
Right, well,
as part of this requirement, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim. I think we've just got time for one more question, Matthew.
So this one's probably for Dee. The appeals process final date is the 14th of October. However, we're not notified of the outcome until the end of October. So how do we deal with that mismatch of dates? That's probably one for you to take away, isn't it?
It really is, yes. Thank you.
Right, okay. Well, I think we're just about done now, because apart from anything else, we're going to get kicked out of this room in about 3 minutes' time. So if you could bring up the final slide. So sadly, we've covered an awful lot of questions. There are a few still coming through. If you think of questions after the call, then this is the email address you can use to pass those questions on either to the resolution team about the incentive scheme, or if you have something related to safety champions, then we've got the maternity safety champion email as well. Thank you for the fantastic participation and all the really good pertinent questions. I hope you found it useful.
And the next WebEx will be in 2 months' time. Next month you will get our usual newsletter. So in 2 months' time we'll have the next WebEx, and the subject is to be agreed. Thank you very much, and please do share the slides and the recording with your board members. Thank you. And thank you to our speakers.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Charging.